Hello, I'm Jonathan Womack. Welcome to this edition of Community Insider as we take you inside, look at the Magness house. And we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Jimmy Haley. And as always, he is out and about in the community doing something that one of my most favorite parts about Jimmy. He knows so much about history. He's going to share just a portion, just a pinch of the history he knows about the Magness house. And really how important it is to Warren County, how so many times we find out when we're investigating history, discovering history, like myself, how much this one place in Warren County is tied so many ways. It's tied to the birthing tree, and then you're going to go in more about that, the railroad, the Magness Library, so many things. So we do thank you for giving us this opportunity. I know you're a busy man. How you find time to do stuff like this, I don't know, but we appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Always.
Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
Stay tuned. He's going to show us around the house, and we've got more coverage of what's inside your community coming up next here on Community Insider.
I'm Mayor Jimmy Haley. I'm the county historian. I'm here at Oakham Historic Plantation here on the Sparta Highway, overlooking Harrison Ferry Mountain and what is known as the birthing tree. Oakham was a plantation started in the 1830s because it was situated in a grove of oak trees that had been an old buffalo trail, which originally was a point of early settlers coming into McMinnville, traversing this path in front of this home place. When William Black decided to build his home here, he nicknamed it and gave the plantation the name of Oakham, and that has stuck ever since. So this is the 185th anniversary of this plantation home, and it's open house today. Compliments of B&P Lamp and the Barnes family, who now wish to sell this property to the proper owners. The original house was very simple. It was a federal style house, 4 rooms downstairs and 2 rooms upstairs. And the Black family lived here for about almost 20 years before it was sold to a family member, Philip Marbury. Mr. Marbury came in here to help build the railroad, had local roots, and was kin to the Black family through marriage. Mr. Marbury brought the railroad into McMinnville in the 1850s, and so when he purchased this house, he wanted it to be a showplace. So he took what was a simple house and added the 2 wings on either side and updated and modernized it a little bit, and it became a showplace with beautiful gardens all around the area. Mr. Marbury was very instrumental in business and industry here in McMinnville. The bringing of the railroad changed the city and this community forever, as things were able to come in by rail instead of by horse and wagon. So people's quality of life was upgraded dramatically just by the railroad coming here. The Civil War broke out. Mr. Marbury's fortunes were turned upside down. This was a slave plantation. The slave settlement was where the health department and where Burger King is. And the slave cemetery is right behind the house on the hill, where also members of the Marbury family are buried. Mr. Marbury's fortune turned upside down after the Civil War and the freeing of slaves. The property became a little bit mismanaged, but Mr. Marbury never gave up hope on the railroad. He wanted to take the railroad all the way to Cincinnati. The company, however, when it reorganized after the Civil War, only got the railroad as far as Sparta, and a little bit further up to Monterey a little bit later on. But Mr. Marbury's fortunes were once again turned upside down. He was about ready to lose the property when the Blue family from Ohio showed an interest in the property, was able to purchase the property. The Blues moved here from Ohio. This became a working farm again. The Marburys introduced Angus cattle to Warren County. The Blue family lived here for almost 40 years. The Great Depression turned their finances upside down. The property was derelict on taxes, and the mortgage payment was due. Mr. Blue's daughter Lila had married Edgar Walling, who was a local banker and son of Jesse Walling, who had been mayor and also was banker here in McMinnville. And so the Blue family basically held management and ownership of it through the daughter Lila's marriage to Edgar. So Edgar bought it and at the steps of the courthouse and held on to it. The connection with the house and the Magness, since it's called the Magness home, was when Mr. Magness died and left his estate. Not only was the library a benefactor, but also the First Baptist Church in McMinnville, which was known as Magness Memorial Baptist Church for years. Mr. Magness left enough money for this property to be purchased and for it to become a home for the aged and indigent. And so it was named the Elizabeth J. Magness Home. And the cornerstone is still over here in the annex property. The annex was built to accommodate what my grandmother used to call the inmates, those persons who in the days before nursing homes had no place to go. Many of them were poor, so sometimes people call this the poor farm or the poorhouse. But many of the families had just had no children. They sold their farms, gave their finances to the county, so this became the county farm. The county ended up in possession of it, and for almost 50 years, different families were contracted out to operate this as a working farm and to take care of the families and the individuals who were living here under the care and the auspices of indigency through the county finances or through giving their fortunes or what little money they had to stay here. This continued on up until the late 1970s, and the county decided that it was not feasible anymore to take the finances of the county when you only had a few people living here. The upkeep and maintenance had become to the point where it was not self-sustaining. A lot of the property had been sold off for industrial development, so Oster, the hospital, the Zurich, all this came off the original almost 1,000 acres at one time before the Civil War. When the county decided to dispose of it, they offered it to the Warren County Historical Society, but with a lot of stipulations on it. Originally, nothing of this property was to be sold, but the county thought otherwise. So bits and pieces have been farmed off. The property was sitting here. There was an offer from a fast food chain to purchase it. The Historical Society had to find an owner very quickly, and this is where Paul and Ann Barnes, B&P Lamp, decided to be our rescue agents. So they were able to purchase the property and restore it. And so much of what you see throughout the house has been additions that the Barneses did when they used this as an antiques emporium. And so a lot of it is not original with the fireplace mantles and the chandeliers, but it has been used on various occasions for an event space, for home health care, and now the property is for sale. So we're hoping that the right owner comes forward. We hope that someone who loves this property as much as the rest of us do, since it is a National Register, it is a historic landmark, it does play a valuable piece of history for our community, and it would be a shame to see that lost. So we're hoping now with new listing agents for the property that the right owners will come forward, it will become a bed and breakfast, or become an event space again, and it will retain most of what the history is still here. So there's only one of the big oak trees still left, and that's the birthing tree, which is across the road here. It's 300 plus years old. It is a national landmark tree as well, and now is in possession of the city, so we have it as a part of a city park. And so we're hoping that the tree lasts a few more years and that little piece of history is also preserved. So when the Barneses bought the property and wanted to use this as an antiques emporium, it was quite simple. And so these marble fireplaces were added to replace the original. The stone floor was added, and much of the crown molding was added as well. These woodwork doors and transoms are all from the 1850s when the Marburys purchased the property. So were the French doors, and the baseboards are all original to the house, as well as the doors. The wings that were added in the 1850s still retain a lot of its original as well, including the floors. But the stained glass ceiling was added by the Barneses. Much of the original furniture belonged to Oakham and to the Marbury family. A few years ago, one of their descendants contacted me and said, I have furniture to return to the home. If there's any way, is the house still standing, is there any way that we can return this furniture to its rightful place? And since it's Oakham, if you'll notice the motif on all the furniture are acorns in reflection of the history of the house and the plantation name. So Miss Virginia Herdman, she lived in Texas, and before she died, she said her family did not really, they wanted it to come back to McMinnville. This is where it originally was. And so Heritage Alliance got possession of the furniture, and since the Barneses are family friends of mine, we cut a deal that we would loan the furniture to the house in its rightful place, and it will stay here until the Barneses decide to do something with the property, and then we'll have to decide what happens to the future of the furniture. But it is a welcomed addition, because to think that, over 140 years ago, people were sitting on these same chairs and sofas in this very room. And so Ms. Herdman, that was her wishes, that the Marbury furniture would be returned to its rightful place. So we're happy that it's here. We're happy that people can enjoy it. When the Marburys moved here, the kitchen had been outside and as a separate kitchen for safety purposes. But when the Marburys moved here in the 1850s and remodeled, they eventually moved the kitchen into this back room. And so when it was the home for aged and indigent, this was the kitchen where all the meals were prepared. And the family that lived here, that were the caretakers, they also prepared and ate their meals in this room as well. You can see there's a lot of outdoor access to the building, because this was a working farm, and many of these were office spaces as well. So to easy access in and out for operating a plantation and farm, they had access doors. And it was also for ventilation as well with the transoms. But the original house was just these main 4 rooms downstairs and 2 small bedrooms upstairs for the children. This is also not the original staircase, even though it's a vintage staircase from probably 1850s or 60s. We don't know really what the original staircase looked like. It had been replaced later on and actually opened up from the back side of the building rather than the front. And so the Barneses wanted to restore the original configuration of the staircase that was in the 1830s home. When it was the home for the aged and indigent, not only did what my grandmother called the inmates live in the annex portion, but they also lived in the main house as well. And so several men were housed in this back room. You can see the back access door as well for easy in and out, but also in the back bedroom in this section of the addition. No central heat and air, that was basically heated with fireplaces and no air conditioning at all. The panel room in the front, the Barnes has added as well. It's vintage paneling and wainscoting. But this was to replicate a smoking room and office for a home of this stature.
How tall are the ceilings?
I think they're 14 foot. If you look at, this would be about 7 foot, so it's twice the amount. In this portion, I think they're actually 16 feet in the annex part.
And that was mostly for cooling?
Cooling, and plus the style, but the heat rose, so it kept the heat up. And with ventilation, and this originally was a hallway to the outside. This was another access. These bathrooms were added later, but this originally was a hallway and had a door access out to the side. So lots of access with these French doors thrown open. You got ventilation with the transoms over the doors. You got a lot of ventilation and cross ventilation, so it was a way to keep things as cool as possible. There is original woodwork upstairs. It's the Federal style that was never changed out. So it's very simple. And this woodwork was added in the 1850s when the Marburys purchased it and did the extensive remodeling and added the French doors in the 2 wings. So the style of the house is usually called piano box. It's like an H style. And so you saw a lot of homes that received remodeling in the 1840s and 50s, including the Hermitage in Nashville, with the 2 pavilion wings that were added on as well. So it was a common style.